Hello, my name is Jeff. Today I'll be talking about ancient Egyptian engineering. Before we get started, kind of got to define a word, engineering. And the best quote I ever found for what engineering is, you guys hear me? Yeah? Yeah. Science is understanding that which already is. Engineering is creating that which never has been. Albert Einstein. So today I will be talking about engineering in ancient Egypt. When I say the word engineering, what do you guys think of?
Building.
Buildings, there we go. Architecture, what else? Bridges. Machines. Infrastructure. Dilbert. Yep, technology. So what is engineering? Engineering is the combination of knowledge. It's a combination of knowledge that is both scientific, economic, social, and practical. So you think about an engineer. They've gone to a lot of schooling. They've taken courses in math, design, if you're an electrical engineer, electrical properties, things like that. So they have to combine all this knowledge to create a project, a building, a circuit. So there's a four-step process to engineering: designing, building, maintaining, and improving. You have to design the product. You have to build the product. You have to keep the product in working order. And then finally, you have to come up with a way to make the product better. Be that machines, structures, materials, or processes. We're going to talk about a few key Egyptian engineering feats. The pyramids were a process of refinement. Before we got to the Great Pyramid of Giza, there were 4 previous pyramids. First one started off as a step pyramid. They just kept building temples on top of each other. After that, they tried to build the first slope pyramid, but they built it too tall and it collapsed. So then they tried to build another one with a wider base, but they were running low on materials, so they had to quickly cap off the peak. Still didn't look like a nice, perfect triangle. Before finally, they created the pyramids of Giza. There are actually 4 full pyramids at Giza, ranging in sizes from some that are very large to very small. So the engineer who designed this, he had to use his 4 different knowledges. His knowledge of economics. In Egypt, workers, farmers, were required to pay a tax in labor. So we would use this labor tax to help him build the pyramids. And it's one of the reasons they were able to build the pyramids so fast. After that, they had to develop some technology. They had to develop ramps to get stones that weighed 10, 15,000 pounds from the bottom of the pyramids to the top of the pyramids. And I can tell you from experience of being there, those pyramids are not small. They're taller than just about any building you can think of. So they designed ramps to go up the sides so that they could move these heavy stones up. If any of you ever tried to drive a car in snow, it's kind of like trying to drive in sand. You slip and slide everywhere and you have no control. So they used sleds to move these things across the sand. They couldn't use wheels, they couldn't use rollers. They just didn't work. And then to make something this big, you had to communicate with a lot of people across a lot of different land. So you had to have some way of telling them exactly what you wanted. So they used writing, which is often the trademark of civilization. Boats. We don't often think of Egyptians in boats. I mean, they live in a desert, right? But right up the middle of the country, the Nile River, fountain of life for them. So they would use boats to bring any cargo they needed from downriver up or from upriver down. When they were traveling with the wind, they would use sails to make it easier on the workers and easier on the sailors. But when they had to travel against the wind, they would use oars. They would manual force to move boats carrying thousands of pounds. Boats in Egypt, there's not very much by way of trees. We think of a canoe. We think it's made of wood. So they would make it out of papyrus, which is a paper-like substance. They would graft over the shell of the boat and wait for it to harden, and then it would float. In Alexandria, there's a port, one of the most advanced ports of its time. If anyone's ever seen the movie from the late 60s, early 70s, called Cleopatra, when you see Julius Caesar coming into Egypt for the first time, he lands at the port of Alexandria, and you see it's this bustling community. It really shows just how advanced the naval infrastructure of Greece was. Next up, we're going to talk about temples. With temples, there's a few really key architectural features. Columns. The Egyptians were one of the first people to use columns. They didn't fully understand at the time how much force a column could hold, so they would attach them to walls because they weren't sure how strong they were. But eventually, they developed and figured out how strong columns were. And this presence of columns served to influence the Greeks in their architecture. The materials they used were mud bricks, which they would leave out to dry and harden, and stone, because they, as I mentioned earlier, they had very little wood to work with. We think of ourselves, we build a house nowadays. You see a house? It's all wood frame. They didn't have that to work with, so they had to make do with the resources they had, and they still made some pretty incredible buildings. So, what can we learn from Egyptian engineering? We can learn about resilience, using the resources you have at your disposal. Precision measurements. The ratio of the base of the pyramids to the height is almost exactly 2 pi. Use of skilled workers and for labor. They were able to build specialty boats. They were able to build the pyramids with such, as I mentioned earlier, precise measurements, considering for a group of people who didn't even have something as sophisticated as a saw. They would use rocks and hammers to smooth out the sides. We learn about innovative designs, doing the unexpected and having it work out, and building long-standing structures. The pyramids are still there. They're the only one completely standing of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, and they're believed to be the oldest. So, if we can take anything from a study in ancient Egyptian engineering, it's that anything is possible.